Now I'd like to welcome our maestro, Giancarlo Guerrero, to the town hall. And Giancarlo, there you are. And I guess, let you say hello to everybody. You're muted still, but start.
Hi, Alan.
Yeah, start by saying hello, and then and just wanted to ask you to first talk a little bit about your experiences in recent months, and some of the things that you've experienced in this pandemic.
Well, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that everyone was had a wonderful time with your families during the holidays. These very odd holidays that we all had, but at least I hope that you were able to be healthy and spend time with family. My two daughters came home to Nashville from college, so it was great to have them at home. And now they're back in their quarantines and getting ready for the semester that begins in a few weeks. Well, this has been very, very interesting times. I have to say that I consider myself immensely lucky because, unlike many of my musician friends, I have been able to at least keep some activity, musical activity going because of my relationships with two particular orchestras in Europe, in Lisbon and in Wrocław, Poland. And so from that point of view, I think I have been very fortunate that, although limited, I've been able to at least keep my musical muscles working and bringing music and keeping myself occupied. And I have to say that in both of these orchestras, it's remarkable to see not only the musicians themselves, but the audience themselves realizing how lucky they are, because they are aware in this hyper-connected world that this is not something that is happening around the world, not in the United States, in some other places. I mean, it's been completely shut down. So they do realize how lucky they've been. And I think they've added a certain degree of special feeling in the hall when we do play performances. Obviously, this has added a lot of challenges, not only musical and logistic, having to make music distanced. This is not something that as musicians we're used to. We like being close to each other, breathing next to each other. So this whole social distancing thing, for the time being, we're willing to put up with it. But this is very difficult to make music under those circumstances when you're away from those people, especially when a big part of music making is the human connection that is so key. I also have to say that I've learned so much about regulations on every different country imaginable, because even traveling now can be quite of a nightmare. I actually ended up having to get special visas from different countries to be able to travel, but even those doesn't ensure that I will be allowed on the plane. I can tell you two experiences, particularly that I arrive at the airport, I show my passport with all of the necessary visas and permits, for somebody at the counter saying, nope, you're not boarding the plane. And then walking down a couple of counters to another airline, and they're gonna let me board the plane. So it gives you a little bit of the chaos that was going on in the middle of all of this, where regulations are not passed around, and it really becomes a matter of luck of who you talk to. So from that point of view, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking showing up at the airport and not knowing, if you're gonna be able to travel. If you do travel, how are you gonna get there? But it's been interesting. I do have to say that one of the most difficult things for me personally has been, again, that ability to connect and to see my colleagues. I conducted in Poland and Portugal, but I wasn't able to even have lunch or coffee with any of my colleagues and my friends there. So the trips are not as fun as they used to be. I have to lock myself up in a hotel room. There's only so much Netflix and Hulu that I can watch before I start getting desperate. But as I said, I consider myself lucky that I've been able to at least make some music under these circumstances. And I cannot wait for the day that we get back to some sense of normalcy, especially in Nashville, our home, and I get to make music with our wonderful musicians again in the near future.
You might talk a little bit about, Giancarlo, a little bit about the kinds of things that you've been able to do even in Europe. I know, the European model of funding orchestras is very different than in the United States. Most of the musicians in orchestras in Europe are state employees, government employees. And so payroll has not been the kind of issue it has been in the United States. But also, so those orchestras have been able to continue doing some things, and a few orchestras here have as well. Different orchestras have different circumstances, but talk a little bit about the kinds of programs you've been able to do and what the conditions have been like, because that probably portends a lot for what we're going to find that we have to do as we get restarted performing.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very good point. The fact that the funding mechanism in Europe and pretty much the rest of the world is state funded. So the musicians and the staff are all pretty much, government employees. And that has provided them with a sense of at least job security. But yeah, they have also been very, deeply affected by this. So the programs now all over Europe where I conducted were 1 hour long, no intermission. Rehearsals even are done without intermission. We would do either 1 hour and a half or 2 hours where the musicians are only allowed to arrive 10 minutes before. You have to bring your cases on stage with you. There are very specific regulations depending on the country as well, but you show up, you rehearse, you keep a distance. We're all kind of, 6 feet, 4 feet, depending on the city and the country that you're in, but there is some distancing. We're all wearing masks. When we get on stage, we take them off. In Europe, we've been fortunate to be able to at least make music without the mask, which is, for a conductor, is very difficult. 90% of what we do comes from the face, and having a mask on, it's almost like having to conduct with both hands tied behind my back. So a lot of testing, that has also been a big part of it. They test quite regularly. And that has made everybody feel a little bit safer. But I have to tell you, in both of these orchestras in Lisbon and in Poland, there is a great degree of fear and apprehension in everybody that comes in, because we know we're putting ourselves at risk. We understand that. And we try to do our best to keep our distance and to respect everybody's space. But in the end, sometimes, things happen and you become, things happen that may be unforeseen. But from that point of view, it was very inspiring to see how everybody just did their best to follow the rules and more importantly, make sure that everybody felt safe. And that to me was one of the greatest things. I also have to say that from the audience point of view, I also noticed how everybody that came in was more than willing to do whatever was necessary in terms of how the logistics were to even go in and go out. I will give you an example. When I arrived in Lisbon, they had only 50% capacity. So they basically taped, they had 1 seat and then 2 seats empty and then 1 seat and then 2 seats empty. And it didn't matter if you came with 5 people together, you were supposed to be sitting separately. And there was a very strict protocol, even giving you like a stadium, a door number of where you were supposed to come in and a time when you were supposed to be there, because you were going to be going in on stages and making sure that there was no crowding on the doors. And then at the end of the concert, it was even more remarkable to see that, like the airplanes, they had literally ushers at the end of each row. And basically at the end of the concert, you were supposed to just sit there, and then an usher would tell you when to stand up, and then the whole row would exit. And it was kind of, funny to see that, but remarkable also that all of these new rules, quote unquote, were learned very quickly, and people were more than willing, as I said, to learn them and get used to them in order to enjoy some live music. And another thing that I noticed, for example, was that no programs were giving out. So they would basically flash the music for that evening on screens on the side. And then when I walked on stage, those screens would go off, and then you knew what the program was. And by the way, the programs were all for smaller orchestra. We never did anything more than 50 or 60 players on stage. So Beethoven symphonies, Mozart symphonies, and those programs, by the way, kept changing almost daily as the regulations were being changed. When I arrived in Poland, it was 50% audiences. Then the second week, it dropped down by regulation by 25% because of the virus's quantity was going up. And then by the third week, no audiences. So we were doing streaming. And going back to what you said, Alan, about how the funding mechanism works, another thing that in Europe, you have to remember that many of these orchestras already are part of the larger radio broadcasting networks. So many of these ensembles already had the logistics necessary to broadcast, not only on the radio, but also over the internet. So they already had the necessary equipment on stage, video cameras and microphone, to be able to broadcast, because during our normal time, that's a big part of what we do. We broadcast over the radio all over Europe. So that in many ways had them a little bit better prepared in the middle of this to be able to do these distance performance.
Well, one thing that I know all of this does is it has, constricted what you can do from a repertoire point of view. But that of course will change as conditions change. But the other thing that you talk about the European model, we all know that the things that we have been through in the last few months, the hard decisions that we had to make, while on the one hand have led us to a place where we're now on a path back. On the other hand, they've been extraordinarily challenging for our musicians, and you yourself were furloughed. So talk about that a little bit and how that's affected the ensemble, because I know that's a burning question for a number of our patrons on the call. You know, I know you've talked to some of the players in recent weeks.
Listen, we are like a great baseball, football team, and we have to train together. And the fact that we have been separated for months now, it's devastating. Not only from a personal point of view of seeing our colleagues and our friends, but from an artistic point of view, we haven't been able to flex our muscles. And when we come back, I have no doubt that our players are going to do even more incredible things than they ever did before. There's no doubt in my mind, because of not only the talent and virtuosity that they all have, but more importantly, because of the love that they have for the institution and for our city. But definitely, we're going to have to like almost get back together and start not learning to play again together, but getting that feel back. Because after a while, you get into this habit almost of you know, you don't even think about it. You know how things work together and you make them happen. Plus, we have to remember that there has been a psychological impact to all of this. I mean, many of us, I mean, at times, including myself, have gone into bouts of distress and depression because there never seems to be an end. And of course, the news don't help either. But on top of all of that, I personally have remained hopeful, and I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I see it now more than ever, especially knowing that that this has been confirmed that we do have a community that cherishes our orchestra, and to see the generosity of our patrons and our donors to step up and do whatever is necessary to keep that light going, and making sure that when we are able to come back, that they will have our back and will support us, and that the musicians I know will be coming and doing their part and performing. But I do have to say that that's going to be a special moment when we all come on stage together, because one thing that I think all of us almost took for granted, we all thought that this, you know, there was never a danger. And in many ways, there may be a positive thing to all of this, to think that reminds us that life is indeed fragile, that everything we have and hold dear can very quickly disappear in an instant. And the fact that this happened so quickly, like whiplash, I mean, we were completely not warned. I mean, one day all of a sudden we were rehearsing, and then the next day we were shut down. And then all of us, I remember saying, oh, we'll be back in April. Oh, we'll be back in May. We'll be able to finish the season. And of course, as the news got worse and worse, I mean, reality just sunk in. But now I think in many ways, I feel we're on the other end of the spectrum when we're now with the vaccines and many other things. We see that there is a path forward, and I am very hopeful for that. But definitely, this has been a great shock. But from a musician's point of view, I know that that is the one thing that we are all looking forward to be on stage, performing live for our wonderful audiences, and going back to what it is our main mission, which is to bring great music to Nashville.
Yeah, and I have to say that the music is the thing we have all missed greatly, and so we're anxious, you know, to be able to take our seats in the concert hall and hear our fabulous orchestra. And you know, that raises the question, you know, as you've traveled and you've been able to do what you have been able to do with you know, some of the orchestras in Europe and even here in the U.S. You've had a couple, I know, of guest conducting engagements, and those are orchestras that have had special funding to keep things as best they can alive in terms of performance. But you know, in terms of what you miss the most, what do you miss the most about performing with the Nashville Symphony in this hall, in this community? What have you missed the most?
Oh, the people, by far. I mean, that's the reason why we make music. And when I say the people, I of course mean the wonderful players of the orchestra. I mean you and our fabulous staff that I see on a daily basis. The people that I run into downtown Nashville when I go out for a walk. That has been something that has been also a little bit painful, to go to Nashville and be it so quiet. I'm not used to that. Nashville is supposed to be filled with live music. I mean, this is completely unnatural to walk around this beautiful city and have, you know, to be able to hear the birds. I mean, I'm not used to that. So But more importantly, you know, is our wonderful audience members and the people that I see during our pre-concert lectures, the regulars that I come to consider almost part of my family. So without them, the music makes no sense. See, it's like, you know, without our audience, I mean, playing music is difficult, which I would like to add is also a huge part of playing music to empty halls. I mean, yes, I'm happy that I'm making music, but it doesn't feel right. Here I am playing music in an empty hall where, if you've ever seen some of the videos that I've conducted abroad, if you follow my Facebook page, it's very odd to walk on stage and take a bow to an entirely empty hall. That's just, it's funny. We those of us on stage are almost like laughing. It's like, how ridiculous is this? But then we get into the music. So it is all about everybody and the people that we not only the musicians that I make music with, but the audiences and the staff that make it all come together. So by far, that has been the most difficult thing. Being locked up in a hotel room is not fun, you know, and going out to lunch with you and with a lot of my players and having coffee with them and hearing about their families, not over Zoom, but in person, and watching them, you know, sharing their joys and happiness. That's what it's all about. That's what inspires me every day.
Yeah, well, that's a great answer. And, you know, I will say that, you know, every one of us who, just the small number of us that stayed behind to try to help get things restarted and refocused, the thing that has inspired and motivated us, we've been inspired by the support of the community, but the thing that has really motivated us is the people. It's getting our colleagues back on stage. It's working to get the staff back that we need to support that work. So it really is, you know, ultimately the thing that we are focused on 24/7.